My name is Chloe Foster. I'm 42 years old and work as a pediatric nurse in Chicago. I've been married to my great husband Oliver for several years, and we have 2 children, Amelia and Mason. About 3 months ago, I had what doctors call a near-death experience. It was the most meaningful and altering experience of my life. It was Tuesday evening, and I'd just finished my shift at the hospital. I was heading home, looking forward to eating dinner with my family. The last thing I remember doing was stopping at a red light about a mile from our house. According to witnesses in the police report, a drunk driver blew a red light and struck my car on the driver's side at great speed. The consequences were disastrous. My car had been totaled, and I was trapped inside, unconscious and bleeding profusely. The second thing I noticed was the sensation of floating. It was as if I were abruptly free of my body, weightless and painless. I could see the collision scene below me, crumpled cars and the bright lights of oncoming emergency vehicles. I saw paramedics feverishly laboring to free me from the wreckage. I felt utterly relaxed and at ease as I watched everything happen below. Then I noticed a warm, brilliant light above me. It was the most gorgeous, inviting light I had ever seen. I was drawn to it, as if it were beckoning me home. As I moved closer to the light, I felt immersed in the most magnificent love, deeper and purer than anything I'd ever felt on earth. It was overwhelming, but in the greatest manner conceivable. Then I saw him, Jesus. He was there, greeting me with open arms. His presence was quite real, so bright. He smiled at me with kindness and sympathy. For the first time, I felt as if I was looking at him directly. That's difficult to put into words how beautiful that was. I felt absolutely recognized and adored. My defects, my mistakes, none of them mattered. I was home. Jesus embraced me, and I grasped the depths of his love for me in a manner I hadn't before. Jesus began to talk with me. His voice was soothing but authoritative. He replied, "My precious child, I have so much to show you. Come and see what I've planned for you and those who believe in me." He grabbed my hand, and we were immediately soaring across the most breathtaking scenery I'd ever seen. We passed through clouds that sparkled like gold and silver. I witnessed breathtakingly beautiful mountains and valleys loaded with flowers and colors I had no idea existed. There were crystal-clear rivers and waterfalls that appeared to be composed of living light. It sounds like a utopia beyond description. It really was. And, as breathtaking as the natural beauty was, it paled in contrast to what Jesus showed me next. We arrived at this vast, bright city. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen on Earth, so large, detailed, and flawless in every detail. It was arranged in a precise square, with high walls of jasper that glittered like polished glass. There were 12 gates, each made with a single massive pearl. The streets were paved with pure gold, but it was translucent as crystal. The city wall's foundations were studded with precious stones of all kinds: sapphires, emeralds, topaz, amethyst, and many others I couldn't even name. That struck me as similar to the description of the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. Jesus affirmed to me that this was the holy city, New Jerusalem, dressed as a bride for her husband. He emphasized that this city is the eternal home he has prepared for all who belong to him. What struck me the most was the light. Everything was lighted by a brilliant golden radiance, but I couldn't see the sun or any artificial light sources. Jesus told me that the glory of God himself was the city's light. There was no darkness or shadows, only pure, warm, inviting light everywhere. Jesus escorted me through one of the pearly gates, and I was immediately taken aback by the grandeur and majesty there. The first thing I noticed was this large boulevard flowing through, the heart of the city. It was like a main street, but more beautiful than you could imagine. There was a crystal-clear river running down the center of the street. Jesus informed me that it was the river of the water of life. On either side of the river were the most magnificent trees I'd ever seen. The tree of life, which bore 12 different types of fruit. The tree's leaves were meant to heal the nations. This corresponds pretty closely to biblical descriptions of heaven. He escorted me to what he termed the Father's house. It was a massive, majestic structure, but calling it a house does not do it justice. It was more like a massive palace complex that stretched as far as I could see in all directions. The building was unlike anything I'd seen before. It was both familiar and completely strange. There were tall towers, huge courtyards, and numerous rooms and halls. Everything was built with the most precious materials: gold, platinum, crystal, and rare gemstones. But what struck me the most was how welcoming and comfortable it seemed. This was not some frigid, pompous display of money. It felt like home. He led me down a lengthy corridor with numerous doors on each side. He came to a stop in front of one door and stated, "This is for you." When he opened it, I gasped in surprise. It was the most stunning room, or perhaps suite is a better word, that I could have imagined. Everything about it was precisely customized to my preferences and personality. The hues, the furniture, the artwork on the walls, it all felt both familiar and more magnificent than anything I could have done myself. He told me that his Father's house has many dwelling places, and that he has gone to prepare a space for every one of his disciples. These chambers, he added, are eternal homes for God's children, places where we will live in complete communion with him and one another. A few things stood out. There was a lovely picture on one wall that portrayed instances from my life in which I had offered love or charity to others. Jesus stated that they were the treasures I had accumulated in heaven as a result of my earthly actions. There was a shelf full with books. When I looked closely, I saw they were journals of my prayers and interactions with God over the years. Jesus said that every speech spoken to the Father in faith was valuable and cherished. It seemed that every element was highly personal and important. There was even a case displaying what appeared to be medals or awards. Jesus emphasized that these were prizes for being faithful and obeying in various facets of my life. He underlined that, while all believers are equally loved and welcomed in heaven, there are different levels of reward depending on how we spend our lives on earth. Yes, he escorted me to this enormous hall known as the banquet room. It was massive, with a table that seemed to extend indefinitely. Jesus stated that this is where all of God's children will dine together in perfect harmony for eternity. As we traveled around the city, I noticed more people than I could ever count. They came from every nation, tribe, and language, just as the Bible states. Everyone was filled with pleasure and peace as we worshiped God and enjoyed perfect community with one another. I saw my grandmother, who died while I was a teenager. She appeared so young and lively. I also ran upon a friend from college who had perished in a vehicle accident. They both welcomed me and expressed their excitement for me to join them eventually. But it wasn't my time yet. He did. He explained that he was showing me what awaits people who place their trust in him. He urged me to share this hope with others, to show them that there is so much more than this earthly life. He gazed at me with such affection that he said, "I am so proud of you. You have been faithful with what I've entrusted to you. Continue to love others and point them to me. Your reward in heaven will be great." I experienced an indescribable sense of joy and calm. All of my worries and fears melted away in his presence. I knew without a doubt that I was loved, that I had a purpose, and that the best was still ahead. Jesus glanced at me and said, "It's not your time yet. You have more work to do for me on earth. Remember what you've seen and share it with others." He then embraced me once more. And then I felt myself being yanked back. The next thing I knew, I was experiencing extreme agony and brilliant lights. I could hear voices around me, both urgent and eager. I had been in a coma for 3 days and was only now recovering consciousness in the intensive care unit. It must have been a shock to return to physical reality. Yes, it was. Part of me did not want to leave the great calm and joy I had felt. but I also felt a renewed sense of purpose and goal for my life on Earth, in every manner possible. I have an entirely new outlook on life and death. I'm no longer terrified of death. I know what awaits me on the other side. But I also have a far deeper understanding for the value of each day we have here on Earth. My faith has been boosted beyond measure. It is one thing to believe in heaven and eternal life. It's a completely different thing to have first-hand experience with it. I am certain that Jesus exists, that his love for us is limitless, and that he is preparing an incredible future for everyone who believe in him. I am confident that many people will be moved by your testimony. Now I'd like to delve deeper into some of the specifics of what you witnessed and experienced. The sheer enormity of the metropolis beyond imagination. Jesus told me that it was miles in length and width, and height is a perfect cube. Consider a city that extends from New York to Denver, and then that same distance straight up into the sky. It's nearly impossible to understand the scale. Despite its massive size, everything seemed perfectly organized and easy to browse. There were lovely parks and gardens around the city. I observed gorgeous buildings that appeared to be hubs of learning and creativity, and worship. These glittering golden streets connected everything. The light appeared from everywhere and nowhere at the same moment. It felt as if the entire atmosphere was infused with a warm golden radiance. Jesus stated that this was God's splendor shining down on the entire city. There was no night or darkness, only everlasting, flawless light. The only thing that struck me was the ideal temperature. It wasn't hot or chilly, but wonderfully warm and cozy. The air felt really clean and refreshing to breathe. And there was a sense of pulsating life everywhere, in the plants, the water, and even what appeared to be inanimate objects. Everything felt alive with God's presence. The city was packed with people, more than I could count. They were from everywhere. People of every ethnicity and age group are dressed in these lovely, brilliant white robes. Everyone appeared healthy and lively, with no illnesses, disabilities, or symptoms of aging. I had brief interactions with a few others. What struck me the most was the pleasure and love emanating from everyone. There was no fear, distrust, or embarrassment. Only genuine delight in meeting and bonding with one another. I noticed people engaged in a variety of activities. There were groups assembled for what appeared to be study or discussion sessions, while others created exquisite works of art or music. I noticed people caring to the plants and parks. However, everything was done with a joyous purpose, not as work, but as a delightful expression of creativity and service. The music of heaven was breathtakingly wonderful. There was a persistent undercurrent of melody throughout the city, as if a celestial symphony never finished. I heard choirs singing in perfect harmony, instruments I'd never heard before, and what appeared to be the elements themselves joining in on the melody. It was as if all of creation was continuously praising God. That sounds breathtaking. Jesus clarified that, while salvation is a free gift received through faith, there are rewards. Heaven is depending on how we live our life on earth. He showed me what appeared to be a ceremony in which believers received crowns and other awards from him. Surprisingly, everyone who got these benefits promptly returned them to Jesus' feet in worship, recognizing that any good in them was due to him. He underlined that it's not about large public acts of piety, but rather tiny, often invisible acts of love, kindness, and loyalty. He showed me scenes of individuals being rewarded for things like patiently caring for a sick family member, silently giving to those in need without being noticed, and keeping loyal in prayer even when nothing seemed to be happening. Time appeared to function differently there. It did not feel as linear as it does here on Earth. There was no sense of haste or rush, but also no boredom or lost time. Jesus explained that in eternity, we will have infinite time to explore, study, create, and grow in our relationships with God and one another. Does this imply that we will know everything quickly in heaven? No. We do not become omniscient. Jesus taught me that heaven is a place of constant discovery and wonder. There are libraries full of knowledge to discover, new skills to learn, and infinite depths of God's nature to investigate. He stated that we shall continue to grow in our comprehension of His love and the wonders of His creation throughout eternity. That certainly calls into question the concept that heaven is a static, possibly dull place. It's difficult to convey in worldly terms because it's so different from what we have here. There's an ideal mix of rest and exercise, personal goals and communal involvement. I witnessed people enjoying meaningful relationships, engaging in intriguing talks, and working together on innovative initiatives. But underneath everything was a constant awareness of God's presence and a perpetual attitude of devotion. It sounds like the exact embodiment of how we were intended to live. Did Jesus reveal you anything about the new earth described in the Bible? Yes, He did. He escorted me to the viewing room in my Father's house. It was like a gigantic observatory with windows that gaze out over the most breathtaking vistas I've ever seen. Jesus emphasized that this was the regenerated earth, similar in some ways but perfected and free of the ravages of sin and decay. It was absolutely lovely. I observed enormous virgin woods, sparkling lakes and rivers, gorgeous mountains and verdant valleys. The colors were more vibrant than anything on our own planet. The animal kingdom was in complete harmony. I saw lions sleeping down with lambs, just like Isaiah predicted. There was no evidence of pollution, deterioration, or death anywhere. He emphasized that we will have the pleasure of discovering and stewarding this new creature. He hinted at adventures and discoveries that were beyond our current imaginations. However, he underlined that, while the new earth would be wonderful, our primary joy and focus will always be on our connection with God, and it was one of the most sobering aspects of my trip. He showed me a large white throne with all of humanity assembled around it. I observed that every person's life was being examined, every thought, word, and deed exposed. Christ's blood covered the sins of those who believed in Him. However, for those who had rejected Him, the prospect of facing judgment without that covering was horrifying. And that was heartbreaking. He showed me a region of total darkness and misery, cut off from God's presence. He stated that this was never His intention for anyone, but that He values the free will He has given humanity. Those who reject His gift of salvation ultimately choose this separation. It increased my desire to share the message with others. Seeing the truth of eternal separation from God made me recognize how important it is for people to comprehend the choices they make in this life. It's given me much more confidence in sharing my religion and inviting people to know Jesus. Throughout my trip, I saw countless angels. They looked to have varied roles. Some were engaged in devotion, while others appeared to be messengers, guardians. Jesus emphasized that angels are created beings that, unlike humans, serve God and play a part in carrying out His goals, both in heaven and on earth. I had a few brief interactions. They were tremendously gorgeous and strong, but also modest and solely intent on worshiping God. One angel told me how they rejoice whenever a sinner repents and returns to God. One of the most beautiful things Jesus taught me was about prayer. There was an area He referred to as the incense room. It was filled with golden bowls, which Jesus indicated contained the prayers of God's people on earth. I saw them rising like incense before God's throne. It underlined how much God appreciates and answers to our prayers. Jesus demonstrated that every honest prayer is heard and answered, but not necessarily in the way we expect. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes no, and sometimes wait. But He informed me that God always replies out of perfect love and wisdom, even if we don't comprehend it from our limited perspective. Jesus led me down an extremely long corridor with numerous doorways. He explained that. Each door led to a unique living space for a believer. When He opened the door to my room, I was astounded at how accurately it reflected my personality and the things that make me happy. It was big and well lit. My favored colors were delicate blues and greens. There was a nice reading nook with shelves full of books. I noticed a piano, other musical instruments, art tools, and a telescope for stargazing. Everything I loved was there, but it had been refined beyond my wildest dreams. He said that he knows each of us personally and creates these locations to exactly mirror our distinct personalities and heart's desires. However, he also stated that the rooms grow and alter as we progress in our relationship with him. They're not static locations, but rather dynamic expressions of our continuing relationship with God. Jesus did show me a few more rooms briefly. Each one was totally distinctive. One glanced. One seems like a massive library, while the other feels like an artist's studio with breathtaking vistas. He stated that in paradise, we will be able to explore and develop all of the gifts and interests he has given us without any constraints. He had a spot called the Watchtower, from which I could watch what was happening on Earth. What struck me was how different everything appeared. From heaven's perspective, things that looked to be extremely important on Earth were frequently rendered unimportant, while simple acts of faith and love shone brightly. Jesus demonstrated to me that God is intimately involved in human affairs, carrying out his goals even via situations that appear chaotic or meaningless to us. He underlined that God's ultimate plan is for redemption and restoration, and that every event on earth contributes to that end aim. Jesus demonstrated to me that there is a strong connection between the church on here and the saints in heaven. He described it as the great cloud of witnesses mentioned in Hebrews. I saw that folks in heaven are aware of and interested in what is happening on earth, particularly in the lives of believers. They, in a sense, cheer us on as we run our spiritual race. That's an optimistic thought. His primary message was one of hope and urgency. He wants people to know that he loves them passionately and has planned a great future for those who place their trust in him. But he also emphasized the need of being prepared and living every day with eternity in mind. He cautioned against becoming overly preoccupied with material possessions and losing sight of what truly counts. He highlighted the significance of being connected to him via prayer and Bible study. He also warned against fraudulent instructors who misrepresent the gospel message. These are crucial reminders. I find myself much more focused on what is genuinely important. Material possessions, career progress, and worldly success no longer seem to be as vital as loving God and others. I am much more intentional about sharing my religion and demonstrating Christ's love to everyone I meet. I understand how unbelievable it sounds, and I would have been doubtful before it occurred to me. But I know what happened, and I feel driven to express it, regardless of what others may think. To anyone who deny the veracity of my experience, I urge you to examine the evidence, not just my narrative, but the countless identical reports from people all over the world who have experienced near-death experiences. While the details may differ, there is surprising uniformity in what people report seeing and experiencing. The concept of Jesus creating a space for us, the emphasis on love and relationship with God, and the view of eternity as active and purposeful are all found in Scripture. But I believe my experience broadened my knowledge. For example, the concept of heaven as a place of ongoing growth and creativity is not always highlighted in conventional teachings, although it is absolutely consistent with God's essence as revealed in the Bible. Without a doubt, it reflects the truth and depth of God's love for us. Everything I saw in heaven, the beauty, the joy, the perfect peace, came from God's amazing love. And the great thing is that we don't have to wait till death to feel that love. It is available to us right now through our relationship with Jesus. I just wanted to stress how realistic and colorful it was. This was not a dream or hallucination. It was more real than anything I'd ever experienced in this life. And the love I felt, Jesus' all-encompassing, flawless love, has changed my life forever. I want everyone to know that they too can experience this love. Thank you for letting me share. My hope is that everyone who hears this will be inspired to pursue a closer connection with Jesus and to live with eternity in mind. Heaven exists. It is more magnificent than we can conceive, and it is open to all who place their faith in Christ.